So you probably saw the title of this video and you've asked yourself, have I lost my mind? And I haven't. It's just that these two games, two completely different genres, I just happen to have played a lot of these two games recently, and a couple of stark contrasts popped into my head. And I think this is emblematic of the state of modern gaming. So I'm going to start off with Automobilista. What is this game? This game is currently on sale on Steam. I picked it up right at the beginning of the Steam summer sale. And this is what I guess to be an R-Factor 2 based racing simulation that takes place mostly in Brazil with racing series and tracks you probably have never heard of. I certainly have not heard of the majority of them, plus some kind of North American and European tracks sprinkled in. They recently released the V8 Supercard track from Adelaide, Australia, things like that. But what I discovered is one of the most pleasant, sort of breath of fresh air games that I've played in a long time. There's a certain passion that comes through this game that is not really seen, I think, in a lot of titles. This is, I guess, a small developer. I mean, this Reza Studios, who makes this game, they've been around for a little bit. They made Stock Car Extreme, which was kind of the predecessor to this game, which I also owned and played a little bit, not too much. But you just get the sense that there is some team behind this game that tried to craft a racing simulator that is deep and that will appeal to the hardcores with their own rigs. And sort of back when I had my racing set up here and played their previous game, just really, really good sort of force feedback and control. I've since given that up and have had to play simply with an Xbox Elite controller. And the game still plays well. There's a feel, there's a very fine level of control that comes through even on the Xbox controller after changing some of the settings, and you can look in the Steam discussions and figure out what those settings are. But just a wonderful control model. Graphics aren't great, but they're greatly improved, I think, over previous efforts and over R-Factor 2 itself. And you just have such a variety of courses, or a variety of cars, I should say. And of course, variety is coming, but you've got the sort of NASCAR-ish stock cars from Brazil, the Australian variants of those. You've got Formula One style cars. You've got go-karts. You've got trucks and dirt racing and stuff like that. So it just sort of is a natural evolution of what they did in their previous game. And it's a joy to play. It's a game that, I guess in a lot of ways you could say, has played it safe. They've stayed kind of within their wheelhouse of very kind of traditional PC racing, plus the Brazilian racing circuit, with which perhaps only these developers are intimately familiar, unless you live in Brazil. But they've put out a game that I think appeals to a wide range of PC players. Certainly, again, those with the crazy racing setups, but also I think it was about $8. A wonderful game to pick up and play. Again, if you like racing, and I do like PC racing games. And to just contrast that with Tekken, a game that I was looking forward to. I couldn't pick it up quite on launch, but around the start of the Steam sale, I picked up Tekken 7. And what struck me, and coming to it after playing Automobilista, what struck me about Tekken 7 was that it seemed to be another game masquerading as Tekken, and doing so very competently. I believe this is down to the fact that they abandoned whatever Tekken engine that they had developed in the past. They kind of abandoned that and went to, I think, the Unity engine, which a lot of games use, and the result is a game that looks like Tekken, that plays mostly like Tekken, but still feels like an imposter. And I have played every Tekken, at least on the home consoles, and I would say up until Tekken 3 in the arcades, or whatever the last Tekken was that you could find in the movie theaters here in the Northeast. And it gets back to feel. It's a very strange thing in games. There are certain games that embed the control pattern so deeply into your mind as a player that it becomes second nature. And I believe, by the way, Automobilista is one of those games. The handling and the physics are just that good. And I think Tekken was a classic example of that. I could close my eyes and think back and, back to the arcade, back to the PlayStation 1, 2, and 3, and just think about the way that Tekken played. And I'm not a great fighting game player. I was never a Tekken master. Actually, I sort of preferred Virtua Fighter, in all honesty. But yeah, I think Tekken, if you grew up in the 90s, Tekken was that tech demo, that kind of shining example of what 3D gaming could be. And it just played a certain way. It's hard to describe. It was quick. It was accurate. It felt supremely balanced, but it was also the kind of thing where you could button mash and cool stuff would happen in this 3D environment. And I think that's part of the reason why it was so popular. What I saw in Tekken 7 was, in addition to this sense that it really wasn't that classic Tekken engine, that it was another engine emulating that, was the fact that the game itself just seemed generally uninspired. The character models didn't look that great. They weren't bad, but for the PlayStation Pro, I was expecting something more. The music was just okay. The backgrounds, the different stages were fair to interesting, but nothing that blew you away. Think back to some of the earlier Tekken games. The stages with the, I don't know what you would want to call it, in that field with the sort of white flowers blowing in the wind. At least I didn't get to that stage. I just fought on what seemed to be fairly generic stages. And also this Tekken, again, not being an expert, it felt like they were trying to balance it for competition. They introduced V-triggers, which was new to me. I didn't play Tekken Tag Tournament, those two games, all that much. And I just don't remember these V-trigger-like moves where you can just sort of change the pace of a battle a la Street Fighter V. The story mode is the story mode. I can't really get into it. I don't feel that fighting games need stories. They just need a competent arcade mode, maybe with an ending, after you beat it with all the different characters. That's fine. I don't need the story. What really upset me is they seem to have taken away the Ghost Battle mode, and this is the mode I spent most of my time in with Tekken. It was just where you sort of picked a character, you tried to increase your rank by fighting against different ranked opponents. You had a choice of 3. Each time you won a fight, you got some golds that you could trade for different stuff in the game. Particularly with Tekken 6 being a real pain in the ass with load times. I spent a lot of time in Ghost Battle, and also in Tekken 5 and Tekken 5 Dark Resurrection. So all that was gone, and what you had, I thought, was just a game that felt like it was trying to be something that the esports circuit will pick up, trying to kind of be that 3D game that might get some Evo coverage or some Evo coverage to match some of the 2D games. But it seemed to have lost the soul of Tekken. Kind of a admittedly subjective description on my part, but I just, as someone who has no vested interest in being a pro, as someone who doesn't fight competitively, it just struck me as not being the Tekken that I remember. And so I think these two games shows you a kind of dilemma. There have been a ton of games that I've criticized for being relatively half-hearted, attempts or cash-ins over the years. But a game like Automobilista, I think, reinforces the fact that there are still some gems out there, and it's just hard to find them. It's hard to, even looking at reviews online or on YouTube, you never quite know what is a true gem, what is a labor of love, and what is a kind of by-the-books piece of content that may or may not inspire. Another game, by the way, that did this for me that I didn't really talk about online was the Ratchet and Clank remake on the PS4. Who knew that this wasn't... Now, I never played the original, so I don't know how close it is to the original. It seems like a totally different game. It seems like, again, a labor of love, and a game that was just so refreshing in its design and in its sort of reimagining of I don't know when Ratchet & Clank came out, late 90s PlayStation style controls. So I don't have an answer to this. I don't know how you distinguish between the gems and the labors of love and these kind of cash-ins, these kind of uninspired works. I think you just have to basically go out there and experiment and see if the games speak to you. Of course, that is an expensive proposition. It is nonetheless a long way removed from the times in the good old days of gaming, whatever that is for you, whether it was the Nintendo, the Super Nintendo era, when it seemed, and of course subjectively this wasn't the case, but when it seemed like if you picked up something by Nintendo, by Squaresoft, by Sega, and in fact by Namco, you were getting something unique, you were getting something special, you were getting your money's worth. It just doesn't feel like that's the case today.